Hi, it's John Adams, and I'm the Public Crusader. The last 24 hours has been quite extraordinary. We have some good news and we have some bad news. The good news is that my two submissions to the ASIC inquiry have now been formally accepted. So if you go to the inquiry webpage, you're going to see item number 21, and it says Adams Economics, and that's my public submission that I provided to the inquiry on the 30th of December 2022. That submission largely contains my public analysis in the two reports I published in October. So in that report, I was able to describe how ASIC's performance over 11 financial years has gone way down in terms of commencing new investigations, in terms of how they actually process reports of alleged misconduct, and obviously documenting the fact that these reports of alleged misconduct that result in no further action go through the roof. So all of that was the public stuff, and I provided that to the committee so that they have a formal record of that. And obviously my analysis stands in complete contrast to ASIC and ASIC submission, which is number one. When you look at the submissions page for the inquiry, they had the same data, but they tried to provide a completely different explanation as to what is going on in terms of their performance. So that's the good news. Now, in terms of the bad news, so on the 30th of January 2023, some of you would be aware that I put in a confidential submission to the ASIC inquiry. And that confidential submissions relates to my private investigation, what I've been calling the package. It talks about the deep concerns that I've had with how ASIC has been performing its so-called official investigation. And just like I said in the last video, this official investigation has been going on for 10 months now. So far, nothing has happened. Everyone is in the complete dark. ASIC won't conclude the investigation, and we're waiting to see if anything's going to happen. And so, as I've said in previous recordings, it is possible that something or someone has interfered in the investigative process. And so my submission to the Parliament was to document those concerns and basically say to the inquiry, given that this is an inquiry into ASIC's investigation and enforcement performance and the application of its rules and procedures, I want you to look at this case study because there is someone very prominent in the realm of politics that have stuck their nose in the middle of this. Have they sent a chilling signal to not look in a particular direction or not to pursue justice in the way that ASIC would normally pursue justice? So that's what that submission is looking at. But lo and behold, I received a letter from the committee secretary only in the last 24 hours, basically saying, on the one hand, that the confidential submission has been accepted, but then on the other hand, they basically sent me a warning to keep my mouth shut. So if you look at the screen, you're going to see a particular quote from the letter that I received from the committee secretary. And I'm just going to read for you this critical quote. Quote, "You should not release this submission or share its contents without the prior approval of the committee. The unauthorized disclosure of a submission or the information contained within it is a prohibited act which is not covered by parliamentary privilege and may be treated by the Senate as a contempt." Now, what does that actually mean? It means that if I tell people who the prominent person is, the Senate may come after me with some sort of legal process. And obviously, a contempt of the Senate could result in the Senate either issuing me with a monetary fine or actually putting me in jail for 6 months. And the legal power for the Senate to do this is the Parliamentary Privileges Act in 1987. So here I am in a dilemma where I was going to tell the world who this prominent person was. That's why Martin North and I recorded a show on the 5th of March called The Final Secret. And our intention was that we were going to broadcast that particular show on YouTube so that we could actually inform our audience and the public at large what is going on, and who is this prominent person in the realm of politics, and what our concerns are, because we think that information is in the public interest. Because if you look at the last 20 or 30 years in terms of Australian society, what you're going to see is a repeated pattern of secrecy when it comes to elite people in this country. And you can see a number of scandals that have happened in the last 20 or 30 years where things have been allowed to linger and fester for many years without actually getting addressed, even though certain insiders knew what was going on. And it's typically taken a royal commission or a dramatic news story to be able to bring the scandal to some sort of light, and obviously for things to be exposed and to be corrected. But in a healthy society that values truth and justice, scandals or potential scandals shouldn't be left to linger for years. Things should be exposed as soon as possible, and for these things to be corrected. And so, if you think about the recent scandals, whether it's child pedophilia or institutional child sex abuse, that scandal happened for years, if not decades. Police corruption, we've seen police corruption right throughout various states that have lingered on for decades. James Hardy and the asbestos scandal, the fact that asbestos was poisonous, and they rolled that stuff out in many houses across Australia. They kept that secret for more than 20 years. Misuse of public funds. Well, we can just see in Victoria with Daniel Andrews and the red shirt scandal that is a complete misuse of public money, if not, full-on corruption, and that has been swept under the carpet. And it's been swept under the carpet in part because too many people are nervous about speaking out against Daniel Andrews because of so-called political retribution. And then if you look at, say, the banks and the financial services industry, we've seen that it took a Royal Commission in 2017, 2018 to expose long-running practices and well-known industry secrets are running fee-for-no-service scams. And it took a number of courageous people, including the CBA whistleblower Jeff Morris, to come out and to expose how rotten in terms of the Australian banking sector was. But people felt comfortable going to work every day knowing they were ripping their customers off, and they had no qualms about that, as long as they were getting not only a high salary, but they were also getting bonuses as well. And then you can see what happened in terms of war crimes, and obviously what has happened with secrets that happened in Afghanistan and those exposure, and the fact that you had a former army lawyer called David McBride, who is now being subject to a secret trial because he dared take secret documents from the Defense Department and gave it to Four Corners, and basically say that the public interest is that secrets or scandals that happen in Afghanistan need to be exposed as quickly as possible. So in terms of all these scandals, secrecy and the cone of silence and keep your mouth shut and keep your head down, that is typically the Australian way, and that's why these scandals continue to happen. But also I would say is that there's a lot of people who are driven into fear to say, you can't say this about this person, you can't say that about that person, this person's powerful, this person can get revenge on you, blah, 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 blah. And because of those threats and perceived threats, everyone in this country hide into the shell and saying, well, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Well, that's not my style. And so because of that, the fact that I've received this email from the Senate Economic References Committee's committee secretariat is quite scandalous in my view. Now, so we're now placed in a situation where I've actually gone back to the committee secretary, and I've asked this committee secretary a number of questions, including, what law prohibits me from disclosing this prominent political person, but also in terms of what's covered by parliamentary privilege and what is prohibited in terms of the disclosure of information. Is it everything that I've said in the submission, or is it certain things? Because there's information related to said company and said individuals and said allegations that I made to ASIC back last year. Those are the things which are not in the public interest at this stage to reveal to the public. But in my view, disclosing the identity of the prominent public person and how that person may or may not have influenced ASIC and their current investigative process, that to me is clearly within the public interest, because we are talking about, in essence, the integrity of the government, in the integrity of the system, and we want to ensure that we have an honest parliament, an honest government, and we have a system that's working for the Australian people. In terms of where we go from here, I'm now waiting to see what response I get in the next 24 to 48 hours from the committee secretary. I don't rule out any future steps. I may release the recording I did with Martin. We may be forced to hold on to it for a little bit longer. The other thing I will say is that it's not necessarily just my call. I've had some discussions with Martin, and Martin wants to have a think about it and in terms of review. So I guess in the next 24 to 48 hours, we're really in a wait and see pattern. But again, the key message of this podcast is the following: that my two submissions have been accepted by the Senate Economics References Committee about ASIC. One of them speaks about the package and the investigation. One of them raises concerns about a prominent person potentially influencing either directly or indirectly or wittingly or unwittingly in terms of the investigative process. And I've asked for the committee to examine whether whether we actually have clean cops and whether we have a system of justice and a system of law enforcement that is clean, that is professional, that is full of integrity, and that is actually working for the Australian people. So where we go from here is I may be able to reveal the prominent political person and why I've named them in the submission. I may not be able to. We'll have to wait and see. But the other, obviously, the other important thing to consider is that in the next couple of weeks, there's still going to be hundreds of submissions going to be published by the inquiry. And those submissions will trigger, no doubt, media stories about various scandals that ASIC has been embroiled in. And then at some point soon, we're going to get into the situation of public hearings, or if not private hearings. And I have yet to be invited by the committee to provide either public or private testimony, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. But the good news, I guess, in conclusion, is that last year I was concerned with ASIC's performance. I said someone has to do something about it. I wrote a report. I triggered 2 parliamentary inquiries. I then put in 2 submissions into that inquiry, one of them highly controversial. Those submissions have been accepted. They are now formal records of the Parliament. And now it is ultimately up to Parliament and the committee members, which are 6 committee members, 3 Coalition, 2 Labor, and 1 Green, to find out what the hell is going on with my package, whether the investigation into my package is being done on the up and up, and whether we are getting closer to the ultimate truth as to what is really happening in this country, and whether John Adams was right or whether John Adams was wrong. And if John Adams is right, whether we're going to see justice happen in this country in the next 12 months. So stay tuned to this channel, because I think that if we get the green light to name this prominent person, you're going to see a mind-blowing video that's going to be published. I'm John Adams, and I'm the Public Crusader.